What if everything you were taught about history, about your identity, even about the Bible, was only half the story? What if the blood flowing through your veins isn't the residue of slavery, but the root of creation itself? This isn't folklore. This isn't a myth. This is verified science. This is a fulfilled prophecy. This is scripture shouting through chromosomes. Imagine a quiet, unassuming man from South Carolina, Albert Perry, whose life seemed ordinary to the world. He lived and died without fanfare, a black man in the shadows of a society that often overlooked people like him. But in 2013, after his passing, scientists examining his DNA uncovered something extraordinary. A Y chromosome lineage dating back over 338,000 years. This wasn't just old. It was older than what mainstream science had defined as the dawn of modern humans, Homo sapiens, typically placed around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, based on fossil evidence from sites like Omo Kibish in Ethiopia and Jebel Irhoud in Morocco. To understand the gravity of this, we must delve into the science of human genetics. The Y chromosome is passed down exclusively from father to son, making it a powerful tool for tracing paternal lineages. Conventional models, built on decades of research, including the Human Genome Project completed in 2003, pointed to a Y chromosomal Adam, a hypothetical most recent common ancestor for all living men's Y chromosomes, estimated to have lived between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago in Africa. But Perry's haplogroup, labeled A100, shattered that timeline. Discovered by geneticists like Michael Hammer at the University of Arizona, it pushed the origins back further, suggesting multiple waves of human evolution and interbreeding with archaic hominins like Neanderthals or Denisovans, whose DNA traces appear in modern populations. Why South Carolina? Perry's ancestors likely traced back to West Africa, regions like Cameroon, where similar A0 markers were later found in Embo people during follow-up studies in 2013. This wasn't an isolated anomaly. It connected to broader genetic diversity in African populations, which hold 95% of the world's human genetic variation, according to studies from the 1000 Genomes Project. Yet, despite publications in the American Journal of Human Genetics, the discovery barely rippled through mainstream media. No front-page headlines in the New York Times, no primetime specials on CNN. Instead, it was confined to academic circles, behind paywalls on sites like Science Direct, where terms like basal haplogroup obscured its revolutionary implications. This silence isn't accidental. It echoes historical patterns of suppressing narratives that challenge Eurocentric views of history. Consider the 19th century pseudoscience of phrenology, promoted by figures like Samuel George Morton, who measured skulls to prove racial hierarchies. Influencing everything from US immigration policies to colonial justifications in Africa, Perry's DNA disrupts that, proclaiming Africa not just as the cradle of life, but as the enduring root, with black lineages carrying the oldest unbroken threads of humanity. But science alone doesn't tell the full story. Let's turn to the Bible, where blood isn't mere biology, it's a vessel of divine truth. In Leviticus 17:11 it declares, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood." Perry's ancient Y chromosome resonates with this, a chromosomal echo of creation itself. Genesis describes Adam formed from the dust, Adamah in Hebrew, meaning red earth, akin to the iron-rich soils of East Africa, where early hominins like Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy species from 3.2 million years ago, were found in Ethiopia's Afar region. This ties into prophecies like Deuteronomy 28, which warns of a people scattered by ships into bondage. "The Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen." Egypt here symbolizes captivity, not geography, a foreshadowing of the transatlantic slave trade from 1526 to 1867, which forcibly transported over 12 million Africans, primarily from West and Central Africa, to the Americas. Ships like the Clotilda, the last known U.S. slave ship in 1860, carried people whose descendants, like Perry, bore genetic markers of ancient origins. Historians debate the prophecy's intent, but in an Afrocentric lens, it positions black people as the scattered tribes of Israel. This isn't fringe. It's echoed in works like From Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolph Windsor, who traces Hebrew migrations into Africa after the Assyrian conquest of 722 BCE and Babylonian exile of 586 BCE. Archaeological finds, such as the Teldan Stele from 9th century BCE, mentioning the House of David, support biblical kingship, but African connections run deeper. Long before European contact, black civilizations thrived in the Americas, challenging the Bering Strait migration theory dominant since the 1930s. The Olmec civilization in Mesoamerica from 1500 BCE to 400 BCE built colossal basalt heads with broad noses and full lips, resembling West African features. Archaeologists like Ivan van Sertima in They Came Before Columbus argue for pre-Columbian African voyages, citing similarities in pyramid construction. Egypt's Giza pyramids from 2580 BCE versus Mexico's Teotihuacan from 100 BCE. And botanical evidence like African cotton in ancient American textiles, the Yamasee and Washita peoples, indigenous to the southeastern U.S. and Mississippi Valley, claimed African roots. The Washita, recognized by the U.S. government in the 1990s as a sovereign nation, trace lineages to ancient Moors or Moors, with mounds like Poverty Point in Louisiana, a UNESCO site from 1700 BCE, rivaling Stonehenge in complexity. These earthworks, built without metal tools, suggest advanced engineering, possibly influenced by Nile Valley knowledge transmitted via ocean currents. Politically, these civilizations resisted erasure. The Olmec's decline around 400 BCE coincided with environmental shifts, but their legacy influenced Maya and Aztec empires, whose calendars and astronomy, predicting eclipses with precision, echoed Egyptian star alignments at Nabta Playa, a 7000 BCE African site predating Stonehenge by millennia. Economically, African kingdoms like Kush, ruling Egypt as the 25th dynasty from 747 BCE to 656 BCE under pharaohs like Piye and Taharqa, controlled gold mines and trade routes along the Nile, exporting ebony, ivory and incense to the Mediterranean. Taharqa, mentioned in 2 Kings 19:9, allied against Assyria, showcasing military prowess with iron weapons, a technology Africa pioneered, as evidenced by Nok culture smelting from 1000 BCE in Nigeria. Technologically, Africa's innovations were profound. The Ishango bone from Congo, dated 20,000 BCE, shows tally marks suggesting early mathematics. In biology, genetic adaptations like the sickle cell trait, prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa, provide malaria resistance, a Darwinian advantage in regions where Plasmodium falciparum killed millions annually until quinine's discovery in the 17th century. This resilience ties back to Perry's DNA, symbolizing not anomaly, but divine design. In the Bible, blood cries out, as in Genesis 4:10 with Abel. The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. Perry's blood cries against historical injustices, from the Middle Passage's horrors, where mortality rates reached 15% on voyages documented in slave ship logs like the Zong in 1781, infamous for throwing 132 Africans overboard for insurance, to Jim Crow laws in Perry, South Carolina, where segregation persisted until the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Church's silence is telling. European missionaries, starting with Portuguese explorers in the 15th century under Prince Henry the Navigator, often portrayed biblical figures as white, influencing art like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel from 1508-1512, where prophets lack melanin. Yet descriptions in Revelation 1:14-15 depict Christ with hair like wool and feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, imagery evoking African features. Africa sheltered prophets. Abraham sojourned in Egypt, Genesis 12, Moses fled there, Exodus 2, and Jesus himself found refuge in Egypt, Matthew 2:13-15, during Herod's massacre around 4 BCE. This flight, lasting perhaps years, underscores Africa's role as divine sanctuary, a theme in Coptic traditions, preserved in Egyptian monasteries like Wadi Natrun, founded in the 4th century CE. Deeper still, the name Yahweh appears in African contexts predating Israel. The Ebla tablets from Syria, circa 2500 BCE, mention Yah, a theophoric element. Inscriptions at Kuntilit Ajrud from the 8th century BCE reference Yahweh of Teman, linking to Edomite regions bordering Africa. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, Exodus 18, a Midianite priest, worshipped Yahweh before Sinai in lands tied to Cushitic peoples. Melchizedek in Genesis 14 blesses Abraham as priest of El Elyon. Hebrew traditions in the Talmud and Ethiopian Kebra Nagast portray him as connected to Shem or Ham's line, possibly Kushite. The Kebra Nagast, compiled in the 14th century but based on older oral histories, details the Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon around 950 BCE, birthing Menelik I, who allegedly brought the Ark to Axum, Ethiopia, where it's guarded today in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. Ethiopia's Bible, with 81-88 books including Enoch, quoted in Jude 1:14, preserves texts removed from the Western canon at the Council of Trent in 1546. Enoch from the 3rd century BCE describes angelic watchers and cosmic order influencing Dead Sea Scrolls found in 1947. Jubilees outlines calendars aligned with solar observations, mirroring African megaliths like Namoratunga in Kenya from 300 BCE. Archaeological evidence abounds. Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions in Zimbabwe's Great Enclosure, a 11th century stone city housing 18,000, Yah-engraved gold in West Africa's Akan artifacts, ancient synagogues in Elephantine, Egypt, from the 5th century BCE, with papyri documenting Yahwistic worship among Judeo-Egyptian communities. The Curse of Ham myth, twisted from Genesis 9:25, where Noah curses Canaan, not Ham, justified slavery. Pro-slavery theologians like Josiah Priest in 1843's Bible Defense of Slavery misused it, ignoring Ham's descendants: Cush, Ethiopia; Mizraim, Egypt; Put, Libya; Canaan, Levant. Egypt's pyramids, built 2686-181 BCE during the Old Kingdom, showcase engineering with 2.3 million blocks, each weighing 280 tons, aligned to true north within 3/60th of a degree. Simon of Cyrene, Mark 15:21, from Libyan Cyrene, a Greek-African city founded 631 BCE, carried Jesus' cross. The Ethiopian Eunuch, Acts 8:26-40, under Queen Candace, a title for Candaces like Amanirinas, who fought Rome in 25 BCE, spread Christianity to Ethiopia before Paul's missions. David's lineage includes Tamar, a Canaanite, Genesis 38, and Rahab from Jericho, Matthew 1:5, blending African elements. Jesus' genealogy reflects global roots, challenging racial purity myths. Lost books like Jasher, mentioned in Joshua 10:13, detailed pre-flood kings. Alexandria's library, burned in 48 BCE by Caesar and later in 642 CE by Arabs, held African wisdom from Euclid, Greek but in Egypt, to Hypatia's astronomy in the 4th century. African monuments, Giza's Great Pyramid, 146 meters tall, used ramps and levers. Senegal's Wassou stone circles from 300 BCE, astronomical markers. Great Zimbabwe's walls, 11 meters high, built without mortar. Perry's discovery, amid 21st century genomics, like CRISPR editing since 2012, affirms African genetic primacy. Global impact, it fuels decolonization movements, from Pan-Africanism of Kwame Nkrumah in 1957, Ghana independence, to Black Lives Matter since 2013. In conclusion, this hidden history teaches resilience. From ancient Kushite pharaohs to Perry's DNA, black legacies endure. As we reflect, consider, if blood speaks truth, what does yours say? Rise into that divine inheritance, for the story isn't over. It's awakening in you.